Hey guys, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing another "if you like this book, I think you would also like this book" bookish tag kind of recommendation video. And I know this might be overkill at this point because I do these videos quite often, but I really enjoy these kind of recommendation videos. I really like finding similar themes and topics in books, and I think if you enjoyed this one thing in this book, I love finding books that are similar to things I've previously enjoyed in books. So I'm sorry if you're sick of these, but I love making these videos so much. But before we do jump into the recommendations, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. Skillshare offers membership with meaning. With so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives, Skillshare empowers you to accomplish real growth. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning that there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. I recently just started taking this class called Going Viral: Write, Film, and Make Content That People Share. And it's taught by Matt Bellassai, and I feel like this class is really great because he's teaching you how to make not only like videos that people want to share, which is what I'm most interested in doing obviously, but also like he talks about tweets and how to craft more comedic tweets and relevant tweets. And it's great because he's a comedian himself, so the class is very highly entertaining and very fun to watch. For a limited time, please use the link in my description to get your free trial of Skillshare Premium. And huge thank you to Skillshare again for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel and the booktube community. Alright, so with that being said, let's jump into the book recommendations. Alright, so the very first one that I have is going to be, if you liked Beartown by Frederick Bachman, then I think you would like Michigan versus the Boys. And I will say that I personally enjoyed Beartown a little bit more than Michigan versus the Boys, but I do think that they have very similar themes here. Both of these books kind of revolve around hockey. In Beartown, we're following this small town of hockey players, and then in Michigan versus the Boys, we're following this girl, Michigan, who is a hockey player. And in Michigan versus the Boys, we kind of have like a she's the man scenario where she's like going out for the boys hockey team. And both of these books also deal with very feminist topics, and they both deal specifically with like rape culture. And I just think they're both very touching, and Beartown is definitely a more adult book and Michigan versus the Boys is a young adult book. But I just think they both have very similar things happening in these books because they both deal with the sport hockey very closely and intensely, and they both deal with like these feminist rape culture topics that are very important and very relevant. And I just think if you enjoyed those topics in one, it's definitely worth your time to check out the other as well. Next one I have is, if you liked the book Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, then I think you might like A Good Marriage by Kimberly McCreight. Now, admittedly, I do understand that these books are pretty different in the mood of them, because in A Good Marriage, this is definitely more of like a crime thriller because we're following a lawyer in this book, and she's gonna be representing her friend Zach that she went to law school with because he's getting accused of murdering his wife, like pushing her down the stairs. And he's saying he didn't do it. But the thing that reminds me so much of Big Little Lies in this book is that in alternate chapters from Lizzie's chapters, we get Amanda's point of view, which is the wife that was killed, but 6 days before her death. And so in her chapters, she kind of has this like small town moms, suburban vibes of like the moms of all these kindergartners. And that aspect of the book really, really reminded me of Big Little Lies. So maybe if you're wanting to get more into like crime thrillers, like if you want to see if that's your thing and you really enjoyed Big Little Lies, then I would definitely recommend checking out A Good Marriage because the vibes of this one were just so similar to the vibes of Big Little Lies to me, and I just love both of these so freaking much. Like, they're both such good thrillers. Next up is going to be, if you liked Misery by Stephen King, I think you might also like The Hole, because this book even says on the cover right here, it says a Korean take on misery. So I do think this book was highly inspired by Misery, which makes sense because the premises are like literally so similar. Because in Misery, we're following this guy who's an author, and he gets into a car accident, and then he gets like kind of abducted by his biggest fan, who is gonna hold him hostage until he writes the next book in her favorite series. And then in The Hole, we're following this guy who got into a car accident with his wife, and then the mother-in-law ends up being the one that brings him back home, but the mother-in-law is kind of like dealing with depression, and she's like a little bit unhinged because of her daughter's death, and she's like digging out the garden that they both made in the backyard, and she's just not totally there. And I feel like because of that, it's just so similar to Misery, because you have this guy that's unable to take care of himself and relying 100% on somebody else to help him recover, and then you're dealing with a woman who is mentally unstable, not totally there, and kind of sketchy, scary to be around. So I feel like if you liked that aspect in Misery, you should definitely check out The Hole. But it is interesting though, because I do think I actually ended up giving The Hole 4 stars and Misery was just a 3-star book for me. I feel like The Hole goes a lot deeper on this topic and was just a little bit more interesting to me. So yeah. All right, the next one is going to be, if you liked Miss Everything by Jennifer Weiner, then I think you might also like The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And this is mostly due to the fact that both of these books kind of feel like literary fiction and historical fiction, and they mainly focus on a story about 2 sisters. And I love both of these books because they both span decades of time, and you're just following this sister relationship that's complicated and interesting. We follow Joe and Bethy from like the 1960s all the way through the present day. Like, we kind of follow them throughout their whole lives, and a similar situation is happening in The Vanishing Half, but this book follows twin sisters, and we follow them from when they're kids all the way through the rest of their lives too. And I don't know, it's just, if you like the idea of following 2 sisters through decades of time and stories that are just very like powerful and moving and just touch on a lot of important topics like feminism, and this book in particular, The Vanishing Half, also talks about things like colorism and race and just a lot of important things like that. So if you enjoyed one, I would definitely check out the other. The next one's gonna be, if you enjoyed Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, I think you would also enjoy Felix Ever After, because both of these books are young adult LGBT stories that kind of deal with someone blackmailing them about their identities. Even though that like sounds intense and it sounds like they're gonna be like hard-hitting, I do think both of these books are still pretty lighthearted for the most part, and I think that's what makes them pretty unique. Because Simon in this book is gay and he's getting blackmailed in his school because somebody knows that he's gay. And then in Felix Ever After, Felix is trans and somebody's blackmailing him with photos of him before his transition. And so I just feel like they have very similar things going on in these books, and they also both just have like really cute friendships, and they manage to be really lighthearted even while talking about very serious things. The next one is going to be, if you liked The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor, then I think you would also like The Shadows by Alex North. And this is mainly due to the fact that these are both thrillers that have very similar vibes in my opinion, because they both kind of have this same trope of like, a bunch of weird shit happened when these kids were teenagers in this small town, and then years later, like 20 to 30 years later, they come back to this small town to try and resolve whatever happened back in the day. And in this book in particular, in The Chalk Man, we're following these kids in the 80s. It has very much like It vibes to me as well, because we're following this group of boys in the 80s with like one redheaded girl friend. And 30 years later, we follow these characters as they come back and try to figure out what happened when they were kids, because they had found this like body in the woods when they were kids and stuff, and it was very creepy. And then in The Shadows, a similar thing is happening where there was something that happened when these teenage boys were being teenagers and being crazy in the woods, and this book kind of has like Slender Man vibes in a way. It also has like a similar theme of like something happened in the woods, kind of like creepy vibes. I don't know, they're just kind of like similar in that way, and that trope of like coming back to a small town is just very prevalent in both of these books. Alright, the next one is going to be, if you liked Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, I think you would also like Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, because both of these books are gay romances that kind of deal with boys who are in the spotlight and in the attention of the media. And because in Red, White, and Royal Blue, we follow the son of the first female president of the United States and then his relationship with a prince. And they kind of start off like hate to love, like they don't really like each other, but then they need to be seen together in the eye of the media in order to persuade everyone that there's nothing going on, like they don't have any issues, so they need to be seen together. And so they have to do all these like events together, and they're kind of like fake dating. And it's not exactly fake dating, but it's definitely like forced togetherness, I guess. But then in boyfriend material, we're following these two guys who one of them has a really bad reputation in the public, so they want to bring this other guy who's like a clean-cut, perfect dude to like make him seem like he's got his shit together. So there's like fake dating happening in this book, and it's just very similar. Like the vibes are totally there. It definitely reminds me of this book. If I had to pick one of the two, I mean, I definitely prefer Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like this book just hits me. Red, White, and Royal Blue definitely has more politics involved in this book, whereas this one's just a little bit more lighthearted and fun. So yeah, but very similar vibes happening here. All right, next up is going to be, if you enjoyed The Silent Patient, then I would definitely recommend The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. These books are very similarly titled, but also have very similar vibes because both of these take place in like mental institutes or mental hospitals. The Silent Patient is definitely more of a thriller, like a mystery thriller, and then The Patient is definitely like a horror thriller, scary book. One of the scariest books I've ever read, by the way. Holy crap. And in The Silent Patient, we're following this guy who's a psychotherapist, and he's interviewing and working with this girl named Alicia who has stopped speaking after she shot her husband in the face 5 times, and they don't know why she did it and why she stopped speaking, and she was a totally normal human before this happened. So it's very fascinating because of this, and this entire story mostly takes place in the mental hospitals. And then in The Patient, we're also following most of this entire story is taking place in a mental hospital, and there's this one particular patient that we're learning about this entire book who is just, some of the things that he does is just nearly inhuman. Like it's hard to imagine somebody doing this, and the noises he makes, and like I don't know what it is about creepy children, but learning about this kid in this book just genuinely scared me. And this book is just really, really creepy, really well done. We follow this one patient in this book from his childhood into his adulthood, and we just get to hear about all the horrific shit he's done his whole life. And it's just crazy. It's traumatizing. It's really scary. But I do think if you liked the vibe of one book, you'd probably enjoy the vibe of the other book. Alright, next up is going to be, if you liked The Bright Lands by John Fram, I think you would also like Clown and Cornfield by Adam Caesar, and vice versa. And this is mainly just due to the small town horror vibes. I will say out of these two, I definitely prefer The Bright Lands. The Bright Lands was a 5-star book for me, whereas Clown and a Cornfield was more of like a 3.5 for me. But I do think that if you enjoyed one, you'll definitely enjoy the other just because of the small town horror vibes and the way that both of these books kind of very subtly bring up real world issues and real world politics within these books. I personally love when a horror book can talk about real world things and kind of make it add to the horror because they're mentioning real world things, and both of these books definitely do that. This one mainly deals with this guy Joel, who's gay, and his younger brother goes missing, so he has to return to his old hometown that's like this really small town in Texas. And then Clown in a Cornfield is actually a young adult book, whereas this one's an adult book, but this one follows this young girl named Quinn who is moving to this new town of Kettle Springs with her dad, and she kind of gets involved with all of the like rebellious kids in the town. And this town is just, you know, your typical small town in America. It's just very conservative and stuck in their ways and refuses to change anything, and there's also clowns involved. And yeah, I just feel like if you enjoyed the vibes of one, you'll definitely enjoy the vibes of the other as well. Then the last one that I have for you is if you enjoyed A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, then I think you would also enjoy The Death of Vivek Oji. This is one that's like hard to recommend because both of these books are just so devastating and heartbreaking that like they're really hard to read. A Little Life is obviously huge trigger warnings for like literally everything, and it's one of the hardest books that I've ever had to read because it's just so devastatingly sad and it's tragic, and it's like the heaviest book that I've ever read for sure. But I do think if you enjoyed the characters and the story happening in this book, then you would also appreciate The Death of Vivek Oji, because this book just also has this amazing character dynamics like A Little Life does. It has amazing friendships and beautiful writing, like absolutely gorgeous writing, and it just hits kind of in a similar way that A Little Life does, where it's just goddamn beautiful and devastating, and you'll just probably be a mess for days after you finish both of these books. I definitely think my personal favorite is still A Little Life because this is like in my top 5 favorite books of all time for me, but this book definitely just gave me similar vibes and it had similar themes as A Little Life, and it just made me So I do think both of these are wonderful, but also like It's hard to recommend either of these just because they are so sad, but I love them both dearly. So I just think if you enjoyed one, it might be worth your time to check out the other if your heart can handle all of that. All right, so those are all the book recommendations that I have for you today. If you agree or disagree with any of these recommendations, then please let me know. And let me know if you're still enjoying these, if you like this book, you'd also like this book kind of videos, because I personally really enjoy them. I don't know if they're for everyone, but I love finding similarities and similar themes within books. I just think it's the most fun. So let me know if you would still like me to continue making these. And as always, thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye.